Thank you, Mr. President. I'm here today to address Democrat leadership's effort to demolish the Senate rules and structure, and thereby destroy the world's greatest deliberative body. Their ploy would silence millions of Americans, and it would substantially harm our nation. Abolishing the filibuster would end the Senate's unique role in American government, which has kept us on the steady course of becoming a more perfect union for the past 230 years. This unique role is to ensure that federal legislation covering all 50 states requires careful debate and broad support, often reflecting compromise, so that American policy is durable and lasting. That way, as a senior senator from Arizona put it in her courageous and patriotic remarks last week, we avoid, quote, wild reversals in federal policy every few years on the basis of bare majorities, which would make our government far less effective and our economy far less stable. Democrats know how integral the filibuster is to American government. Democrats have said it themselves. Eliminating the filibuster would, quote, be the end of the Senate. That's a direct quote from the senior senator from Illinois in 2018. The Democratic leader, before assuming his current position, said that eliminating the filibuster would, quote, be a doomsday for democracy. And President Biden, when he was Senator Biden, said that to eliminate the filibuster would be, quote, the arrogance of power. Apparently, he's now suffering from such arrogance. Until they took control of the Senate last year, most Democrats passionately advocated for preserving this critical Senate rule. That's because it enables our representative government to function and reflect the will of the people. Indeed, in 2017, when there was a Republican in the Oval Office and a Republican majority in the Senate, 32 Democrats, including then Senator Kamala Harris, signed a letter supporting the filibuster. During the Trump administration, Democrats routinely used the filibuster to block Republican legislation, including bills on police reform, border security, and late-term abortions. Important bills that impacted life, sovereignty, and community safety. Certainly bills that Republicans wanted to enact. Yet when met with a filibuster, Republicans didn't change the rules on a completely partisan basis. Republicans didn't tear down this institution in order to score short-term partisan political points. And Republicans certainly didn't use cheap demagoguery to create a fake hysteria to justify doing so. Yet now that Democrats are in majority, nearly every one of those 32 Democrats has completely reversed himself or herself, with a few notable exceptions. Why? Because this is about one thing: power. Doing the exact same thing is a doomsday for democracy when it's a bill they oppose, but it's essential to save democracy when it's a bill they support. It's about power. There doesn't seem to be a power grab that's too extreme for the modern left, whether it's abolishing the filibuster, packing the Supreme Court, or making the District of Columbia a state. There's no institution that they aren't willing to destroy. This is shameful because Democrat leaders' past statements show that they know that destroying the Senate would be disastrous for our nation. Let's call this what it is. It's worse than a solution in search of a problem. It's a power grab in search for a crisis. In this case, they had to manufacture a crisis to justify the power grab. They've been trying to pass this bill for years. Democrat operatives first introduced a version of this bill on January 24th, 2017, 4 days after President Trump was elected to office. It was part of their scorched earth policy to challenge the 2016 election results, clinging to the false claims of Russian collusion. Since then, they've continued to maniacally and on a wholly partisan basis push this electioneering fantasy. Even though this bill is about keeping power, they use whatever justification is most convenient at the moment. In 2017, it was President Trump and Russia. In 2020, it was the pandemic. And now, it's the preposterous claim that returning to pre-pandemic voting crisis is the end of democracy. This election takeover would impose taxpayer-funded campaigns. It prohibits overwhelmingly popular common-sense state voter ID laws. What does nullifying voter ID laws and handing out taxpayer-funded campaign dollars have to do with voting rights? Last night, the senior senator from Virginia pointed out that Republicans have always led the way on voting rights. So why not now? Because this bill isn't about protecting voting rights. It's about protecting politicians. This isn't the 14th Amendment. It's Washington Democrats' 14th attempt to take over election in all 50 states for the third different reason in the last several years. Americans want laws that make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. Such laws currently exist throughout the country. That's why we had record-breaking voter participation in 2020, including in my home state of Tennessee. So ask yourself, with more Americans voting in the last election than ever before, why is this Democrats' top priority? Why are they willing to destroy the Senate to do it? What's the real reason they're focusing on this made-up crisis while ignoring actual crises of inflation, falling real wages, soaring energy prices, supply chain crises, a collapsed southern border, the collapse of Afghanistan, and an increased authoritarian aggression around the world? Real problems that actually affect the American people. Democrat leaders have tuned out those concerns. They're taking no action to address them. Thinking about it, our country has the highest inflation rate in 40 years, and the Senate Banking Committee, which has jurisdiction over our nation's monetary policy, has not held a single hearing examining this topic since it began in 2021. To avoid those issues, they created a fake crisis to take over elections, a desperate attempt at self-preservation, because Americans are rejecting their agenda. That's the real reason Democrats are pushing this. It's about protecting the power of politicians here in Washington. Elections should be determined by the voters, not by the politicians. Last week, President Biden traveled to Georgia to demonize all Americans who don't submit to this hyper-partisan political agenda. He ranted that Americans who support the constitutional system of free, fair, and locally run elections are somehow bigots. In support of this scheme, the Democrat leader offers the talking point that state legislators don't have filibuster rules. So why should the United States Senate? The answer to this is obvious, because federal legislation governs all 50 states as opposed to state legislation that just affects one state. It requires broader support, more than a bare majority in a 50-50 Senate. This is the greatest nation on earth, and the Senate is its compass. This isn't the Democrat leader's political plaything, Mr. President. Ensuring broad support for federal laws, which ensures American stability, is the very purpose of the United States Senate. Sadly, this election power grab is just the start. With the filibuster gone, Democrats would be free to enact mass amnesty, pack the Supreme Court, pack the Senate, punish law enforcement officers, and much, much more. It was my hope coming into this new year that the Senate would refocus on what we were elected to do, listen to the American people, and address their concerns. Yet the recent rhetoric of Democrat leadership has dispelled any such optimism. The American people deserve a government that acknowledges their concerns and works tirelessly and constructively to address them. The serious problems we face as a nation demand it. Americans want us to do our jobs. Abolishing the Senate's rules that guarantee debate and compromise would be, quote, the end of the Senate, as the senior senator from Illinois put it. It would do irreparable harm to the fabric of our government and to the cohesion of our nation. I hope my colleagues find the strength and the courage to maintain their previous longstanding support for preserving the Senate's role. I hope they reject this cynical move to steamroll half of its members and the voters they represent. Thank you, Mr. President.